I'm Larry Midowo in Nairobi, Kenya, and this is CNN.
A very warm welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Isa Soares Tonight. Starmer out, Burnham in. The UK sees its 7th Prime Minister in 10 years take to the helm. We'll go live to Downing Street for you for the very latest. Then a 9th consecutive night of trading strikes. US President Donald Trump vows strong retaliation against Iran after a deadly weekend for American service members. I'll speak with an expert in the Gulf region. And then elation on the streets of Madrid as Spain are crowned World Cup champions. Their parade about to kick off any moment. These are live pictures. But first tonight, 10 years, 7 leaders and 1 man vowing to deliver the change the country needs. We begin right here in the UK this evening, where the new Prime Minister Andy Burnham is wasting no time in setting out his vision for Britain. He becomes the 7th Prime Minister in just about a decade, replacing Keir Starmer after a leadership battle in the ruling Labour Party. Burnham is promising to make politics, quote, work better as he begins life at number 10. He says he will outline measures to tackle the cost of living crisis on Tuesday before laying out what he said was a 10-year plan later in the year. Max Foster is more on a hugely eventful day for British politics.
Britain's new Prime Minister, the 7th in just over a decade of political turmoil, arriving at Downing Street on Monday with a promise of change.
I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be. We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years.
Doing away with the traditional Downing Street speech lectern, Burnham pledged to restore faith in government, bring down the cost of living and end rough sleeping.
I will put the care of people at the heart of everything I do.
It came after a warm goodbye to the former leader, Keir Starmer, earlier on Monday.
My work is done.
His resignation making him the shortest-serving Labour Prime Minister in history.
I go with good grace, I go with a smile, and I go proud of everything that we have achieved.
It was less than 2 years ago that Starmer led his party to its biggest majority in Parliament this century. But the British public soon soured on him, and ultimately it was pressure from within his own party amid lagging poll ratings that led to his exit. And this moment.
As I now pass the baton to Andy Burnham, I wish him every success. He has my full support.
After leaving Downing Street, Starmer travelled the short journey to formally offer his resignation to King Charles at Buckingham Palace. Burnham then seamlessly stepped into his place as he was invited to form a government by the monarch. For Andy Burnham, this is actually a return to Westminster. He was a Member of Parliament here for 16 years. He was a member of the Cabinet as well, before going on to Greater Manchester, where he became Mayor and one of the most popular politicians in the country. Now he's urging everyone, his supporters and the general public, to get behind him as he takes on his biggest job yet, the biggest job in the country.
I will give this my all, and I ask you all to pull with me. Let's build a new national sense of unity, of common purpose and positivity. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again, the moment we bring back hope.
But as the man dubbed the King of the North takes office behind the shiny black door in Westminster, the difficult decisions, both at home and abroad, begin.
And Max Foster joins me now from 10 Downing Street, just outside 10 Downing Street. Max, the Prime Minister, and we heard him say there numerous times, says he's going to be doing things differently, painting himself in many ways as a change maker. Is that starting to be visible, Max, from where you are with the coming and going? Just talk to us about Burnham's top teams so far.
Well, what's interesting is that, you know, the number 2 job is the Chancellor of the Exchequer in number 11 Downing Street. That is the Finance Minister. Lots of senior figures around Burnham had been jockeying for that position, briefing that they were, you know, wanting to go for that. Ed Miliband was one of the key people behind that, but Ed Miliband did not get that job, and neither did Shabana Mahmood, who was the other front runner. And it really says a lot about how tight Andy Burnham's group is that it didn't leak, because in the end it was John Healey, you'll remember, Isa, was the Defence Secretary who walked out of Keir Starmer's government because he felt that the Defence Department wasn't getting enough money. He also has been complaining about how the Treasury is run and how it's not efficient, doesn't help the work of government. So to put him into the Treasury is an interesting move, and we can probably deduce from that that the Defence Department will be getting a lot more money off the back of that. In fact, Shabana Mahmood is going to remain as Home Secretary. She's from the right of the party, and we're just looking to see who's going in and out, to see who might be getting jobs. Ed Miliband will be Foreign Secretary, so still a big job for him, bit of a consolation prize, but he's going to be the face of the UK around the world, Isa.
And we heard Burnham, we know he's made calls, Max, time for calls today with world leaders. One of those was President Donald Trump. And Burnham, I'm just going to quote what we've been told by Downing Street, that he underlined his commitment to defence and security, is what they told us, and said ensuring the security of the UK and its allies was top of the agenda. How do you expect these two leaders to get on, Max, given, of course, the friction that we saw at the end of Starmer's premiership?
Well, I think, you know, one thing, increasing defence spending is going to be something that President Trump wants to hear. He's long complained about UK's lack of contribution to NATO. I think that there is talk that one of the reasons Ed Miliband didn't get the top job at number 11 was because he isn't pro North Sea oil drilling. So Andy Burnham does appear to want to not necessarily create more centres of drilling in the North Sea, but to increase get more out of the licences that are currently there. And President Trump has already spoken about how he thinks that's a good move, because he's been pushing that for a long time. So there's a couple of things that President Trump can look for. President Trump has described Andy Burnham as a liberal. I think that's a fair judgment. He almost made it sound like an insult, though, so we'll wait to see how he goes with that. But I think on a personal level, Andy Burnham is very personable. He does get on with people. He's very charming. And Donald Trump is described in the same way when people meet him face to face, usually as well. So I think they can find some common ground, a bit like the Mayor of New York has managed to do. Despite coming from the left, he's managed to find common ground with the president. I think Andy Burnham has got the potential to do that, but he also can't be seen to kowtow to the president, because one thing Keir Starmer was praised for was the way he pushed back against President Trump on the war in Iran.
What did you take away, Max, from his speech today? I was quite surprised. I was out walking my dog when I was listening to his speech, but I was quite taken aback with the fact there were no handwritten notes. He didn't have the lectern, of course, a famous lectern. How was that received? And then speaking very much like one of us, right?
Yes, I mean, no script, no policy. That's kind of one of the judgments you could make on it. He speaks so well, and he ad-libbed the whole thing, and just showing that he had the confidence to do that on his maiden speech was pretty incredible. It shows his confidence, and he does speak to the people. He talked about politics being broken, people fed up with politics. He was keenly aware of all of these prime ministers that have churned through Downing Street recently. But until we actually see some policy, it's very difficult to judge, the style over the substance.
Yeah. Indeed, and we shall get a sense of that, I believe, by tomorrow. Max Foster, thanks very much, Max. I'll speak to you in the next hour. Let's stay with this. I do want to focus, in fact, on Keir Starmer's legacy with a man who knows him like few others. Peter Hyman is a former senior advisor to Starmer. He's also the author of the Substack Changing the Story. He's here with me on what Starmer achieved and the challenges that remain for Andy Burnham, as we heard there Max talking about, in terms of we don't have a clear sense yet of the policies. Peter, welcome to the programme. Let me start, if I may, with Keir Starmer. You work closely with him, you know him well. Today, as he was leaving office, I heard his speech. He said he was leaving with good grace and a smile. Just reflect for a moment for our viewers around the world on his leadership. How do you think history will judge him as Prime Minister?
Hi there. Well, they'll judge him to start with as the man who saved the Labour Party. Under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, it had the worst defeat since the 1930s, and people said Labour wouldn't get back into power for at least a decade, if not longer. But he turned it round in the space of 4 years and won one of the biggest majorities ever for the Labour Party. So that secures his place in history to begin with. Then, in the 2 years after that, the 2 years he's had as Prime Minister, I think fair-minded people would say he did well on the international stage, with Ukraine on the one hand, dealing with Trump, who is, as we all know, quite tricky to deal with, and projecting Britain's greater confidence on the world stage. So I think there is quite a lot of legacy he can be proud of, even as your reporter has said, he didn't connect with the British people in a way that was long-term sustainable.
So, Peter, do you think, I mean, this is something that we often get asked by international audience, we're reporting just, from our bureau, indeed from Downing Street, whether changing the Prime Minister actually solves Labour's problems, given how many Prime Ministers the country has seen in the last 10 years. I mean, in your view, does Andy Burnham need to build on Starmer's strategy and refine it, or does he need to draw a clear line under it and set out a fundamentally new direction?
It's a very good question. And when you come in, and you're right, 7 leaders in 10 years is ridiculous in a way. But you have a big judgment. Is it continuity or is it change? And the sort of answer, really, I suppose a sensible answer, is you've got to decide which is which. If he's started to set a direction that is now making the economy more stable, and Rachel Reeves was part of this, we're beginning to grow, well, then that needs a rocket boost. If he's started to build new homes, and we need 1.5 million, then that's got to have a rocket boost as well. But there are other things where he will have a clear direction. He's come to Downing Street with a big argument, and in politics, big arguments matter. And his big argument is Britain is too centralised. It's too much based in Westminster and Whitehall, and we need to get power out to every community in the country, particularly, and this will resonate, for example, with people listening from America, in the deindustrialised parts, which feel left behind in the growing economy. So his idea of pushing power out of the centre and giving people a sense of control and agency over their lives is a big idea. We've now got to see him really make that happen.
Let me ask you about Nigel Farage. Viewers will know around the world who is the Reform UK leader. He, as you would expect, he's already seized on today's events, arguing that this new Labour government no longer has a mandate and calling, as you would expect, for a general election. Do you expect those calls to grow louder, to gain momentum, or is that more political positioning than a serious argument at this stage?
Yes, it's political positioning. He's obviously personally mired in scandal at the moment. But we have a system in Britain where the public, it's not presidential. So you elect a party for the 5 years of a parliament, not a leader. And therefore, changing the leader in our constitution doesn't mean you have to have an election. Now, at some point in the next couple of years, Andy Burnham might think, well, I want my own mandate because the last mandate was for Keir Starmer. But there's no obligation to do that. And I think the most important thing for him to do is to get on, show momentum, and show he's got a real sense of vitality in changing the country, which is what people want.
Talking about change, let me give you a sense and viewers a sense of what Max and I were just talking about in terms of Burnham's top team so far. We have John Healey, who was the former Defence Secretary, now moving into number 11, the top job as Chancellor. We've got Ed Miliband now taking over as Foreign Secretary, Shamana Mahmood. And I am seeing, as you and I were just talking there, that Angela Rayner has been seen arriving at Downing Street. What do you make of those moves so far? No decision as of yet, I may add, on the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner.
Yes, he's beginning to build his team. Until you see the whole team, you won't get the sort of balance of that. John Healey is who I know pretty well, is a very respected figure. He will be a very sound chancellor. I think he will give a lot of people confidence, particularly in business, that he's not going to do anything rash. The question then is he a reformer of the economy? Andy Burnham has pledged to build a new economy. So what we will want to see in the next few months and years is, can John Healey really shape that in the budgets? It's a difficult time for the British economy, and it needs real imagination to get it growing again. So that's the key appointment so far, and we'll have to see how that works out.
Peter Hyman, really appreciate, Peter, you taking the time to speak to us this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we're going to leave UK politics for just a moment and turn our eyes to the Gulf and to the Middle East, because we're seeing a rapidly widening war across the Middle East, with both Iran and the US signaling they are ready to escalate. An American official telling CNN the US is sending additional fighter jets and refueling tankers to the Middle East. That, as Iran steps up attacks on Arab states, Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan, all countries, by the way, with US bases, while US President Donald Trump continues to claim Iran's military has been, if you remember the word he keeps using, is obliterated. Well, the Pentagon has identified 2 US soldiers killed in Jordan over the weekend. Another died in Iraq. They are the first US troops killed in the war since March. One service member is still missing. And despite all of this, both Washington and Tehran insist diplomacy remains an option, albeit, it seems, an increasingly unlikely one, at least at this stage. Let me bring in our Nick Robertson, who joins us from Jerusalem. So, Nick, just lay out where we stand right now, because as I just mentioned, we are seeing attacks across the Gulf. Give us a sense of how the region, first of all, has been responding to these attacks and the real fears of this escalating.
Yeah, I was just looking at my phone just now, because we've been hearing in the last few minutes that sirens have gone off in Jordan. We're trying to figure out where they've gone off and what that might mean. And that's become quite common in Jordan over the past 5 or 6 or 7 days. Indeed, sirens, there were warnings of a possibility of an attack in Aqaba yesterday. And indeed, that attack did come. And the IDF, which has a sort of a joined up air defense system with Jordan, was able, from its side of the border, Eilat, just across the border from Aqaba in the south of Jordan, was able to help bring those ballistic missiles that were coming towards Aqaba down. Now, we don't know where it is being targeted, or if it's actually been targeted, or if Jordan has actually been targeted, but certainly the sirens were going off there a little time ago. As we heard in Kuwait a few hours ago, the sirens went off there. Bahrain earlier in the day. These 3 countries have really been bearing the brunt of Iran's attacks. Iran says that it's attacking US military assets, and it seems to be, in Jordan at least, attacking air bases where it says there have been aircraft, either aircraft in undercover or helicopters they claim to have attacked. We don't have those sorts of details or confirmation from the Pentagon, but we are seeing from the US military announcements of those 2 service members killed in Jordan. Several others have been injured in a number of different locations over the past few days. So it does feel, at least here, that the tempo is stepping up a bit, and with the United States announcing bringing in additional fighter aircraft and support refuel tankers, those KC-135s, that this is escalating. escalating. But I think it's worth saying that both Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Iranian Foreign Minister's spokesman today both said that there's still a possibility for diplomacy. So that's still a possibility. I think that's what they're saying.
Still a possibility, Nick, but are the communications ongoing? We know from previous occasions the Pakistanis were the ones leading these comms. Is that still open? What are you hearing on the diplomatic front?
It's hard to know what's actually happening on the diplomatic front because, of course, it's what happens inside the meetings. But one of Pakistan's key mediators, the Interior Minister, who's had a number of trips in the past to Tehran, is actually hosting Iran's Interior Minister in Pakistan right now. The Iran's Interior Minister arrived there a couple of hours ago. Now, what may come out of that meeting, we really don't know. There is a sense in the Gulf here that obviously they don't want an escalation. If we go back to April time, when the United States was sort of going towards the ceasefire, there was a real concern when the United States looked like it was starting up some military operations again. It wasn't clear to the Gulf states what the end game was for the United States at that point, what the strategy was. And I think there's a sense of that at the moment. So behind the scenes, you can be pretty sure there is pushes and efforts to make diplomacy happen. But again, we don't see the product of it. There isn't a door, if you will, a diplomatic door for an off-ramp opening up. Both sides agree that they're no longer following the memorandum of understanding or working towards it. There have been reports of another ship hit, another commercial vessel hit just off the coast of Oman this evening. There was another one hit off the coast of the UAE earlier on overnight. So Iran continues to project that force to keep the Strait of Hormuz, to keep the management, as it sees it, of the Strait of Hormuz in their hands. And that's the conundrum here for President Trump. If you go for diplomacy right now, Iran still has the military means to continue to control the Strait of Hormuz, which is what he started up this current phase of the military campaign for.
Yeah, in the meantime, we are hearing, many in the US asking what, like you said, Nick, what the end game is, given, of course, the death toll servicemen that we are seeing increase in the region. Nick Robertson for us there in Jerusalem. Good to see you, Nick. Thank you. And in about, 15 minutes or so, I'll be speaking with a Middle East and historian, Kuwait, about the threat of further regional escalation. Really want to get the perspective from the region, stay in the Gulf, regarding, of course, this escalation that we are now seeing that Nick was just laying out for you. Well, brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate appeared in a Miami courtroom today, hoping to prevent the US from sending back to the UK. US Marshals arrested the Tates on Saturday after British prosecutors requested their extradition. They have been charged with dozens of offences, including rape and sex trafficking. The Tates are online influencers and big supporters of US President Donald Trump. They became notorious for their deeply misogynistic content, but at the same time, they were racking up charges. They face accusations in Romania relating to sex trafficking and exploitation too. Their lawyer says they want to stay in the US and will fight extradition. And some news just coming in to us right here at CNN. British prosecutors say they have charged a 28-year-old man with the murder of former lawmaker Anne Widdecombe. The 78-year-old former Member of Parliament was found dead in her home earlier this month. She had sustained what police called serious injuries. We'll stay across any new developments coming out of the UK. In new developments, a potential setback for Paramount's Skydance in its takeover of CNN's parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery. A judge has granted a temporary restraining order to pause the merger. This while she considers legal challenge brought by a coalition of 12 states. The order prevents the companies from completing the deal this month, but it's only in effect for a short period of time. The states will now seek a preliminary injunction which could freeze the merger for months. We'll have more on that in the next hour. And still to come tonight, sentencing in New York for a notorious leader of a Mexican drug cartel. We'll explain what's next for El Mayo.